The morning air felt crisp against Alex Chen's face as he stepped out of his private jet. Behind him, the skyline of New York City sparkled in the distance, a testament to the empire he had built from nothing. At 35, Alex was at the top of his game, founder and CEO of Chen Innovations, a tech company valued at billions. His life was a carefully orchestrated symphony of business meetings, charity galas, and occasional getaways to exotic locations. What it didn't include was children, family responsibilities, or lasting relationships. Alex checked his watch, a habit he couldn't shake even when time was entirely at his disposal. His driver was already waiting, standing beside the sleek black Mercedes that would take him to his penthouse apartment in the heart of the city. As he slid into the back seat, his phone buzzed with notifications. Emails from his executive team, meeting reminders, and investment opportunities that couldn't wait. But one notification stood out, a text message from a number he hadn't seen in years. "Alex, it's Priya. I know it's been forever, but I need to talk to you. It's important. Priya Kumar." The name alone was enough to transport Alex back to sun-drenched summer days in their small hometown, where they'd grown up as next-door neighbors. Best friends since they were 5 years old, they had been inseparable throughout school, supporting each other through every triumph and heartbreak. Until college pulled them in different directions. Until life happened. Alex stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. They had promised to stay in touch, but promises were easy to make and hard to keep. The last he had heard, Priya had married some guy she met in graduate school and moved to Boston to pursue her medical career. That had been nearly 7 years ago. "Everything all right, sir?" his driver asked, catching Alex's troubled expression in the rearview mirror. "Yes, fine," Alex replied automatically, though he was far from fine. Something in Priya's message stirred a feeling of unease. Priya had never been one to exaggerate, and if she was reaching out after all this time, it had to be serious. He typed a quick response, "Of course. When and where?" Her reply came almost instantly, "Can you come to Boston Memorial Hospital? Room 412. Tomorrow if possible." Hospital? The unease in his stomach turned to dread. Without hesitation, Alex called his assistant. "Lisa, I need you to clear my schedule for the next few days." "But sir, you have the board meeting tomorrow and the investor presentation on Thursday." "They'll have to wait. This is a personal emergency. And book me a hotel in Boston, near Boston Memorial Hospital." Alex ended the call before Lisa could protest further. He leaned back against the leather seat, closing his eyes as memories of Priya flooded back. Her infectious laugh, her fierce determination, her unwavering loyalty. They had once shared everything. And now, she needed him. The next morning, Alex found himself standing outside room 412, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He had faced down corporate rivals, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and weathered market crashes, but nothing had prepared him for what might be waiting behind that door. He knocked softly, and a tired voice called, "Come in." The room was bathed in the sterile light typical of hospitals, but Alex barely noticed the surroundings. His eyes were fixed on the figure in the bed, Priya, looking simultaneously like the girl he remembered and a stranger. Her long black hair was pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she seemed thinner than he remembered. But when she smiled, it was the same smile that had brightened countless days of his childhood. "You came," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course I came," Alex replied, moving to her bedside. "What's going on? Are you sick?" Priya shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, not me. It's..." She glanced toward the corner of the room, where Alex noticed for the first time a clear hospital bassinet. Inside lay a tiny baby, wrapped in a blue blanket. "My son, Arjun," Priya explained, her voice breaking. "He's 3 months old and he needs a liver transplant." He was born with biliary atresia. It's a rare disease where the bile ducts outside and inside the liver don't develop normally. Alex moved closer to the bassinet, looking down at the sleeping infant. The baby's skin had a yellowish tint, jaundice, Alex recognized from his company's medical research division. Despite the tubes and monitoring equipment surrounding him, the baby looked peaceful, unaware of the battle his tiny body was fighting. "I'm so sorry," Alex said, genuinely moved by the sight of his old friend's suffering child. "What can I do? Do you need money for the treatment? The best specialists? I can make calls right now." Priya looked down at her hands, twisting in the hospital blanket. "It's more complicated than that. Raj, my husband, he left us 6 weeks ago. The stress of having a sick baby, he just couldn't handle it. He's moved back to India." Alex felt a surge of anger toward this man he'd never met. "He abandoned you and your sick child? What kind of—" "Please," Priya interrupted. "I didn't ask you here to judge him. The situation is what it is." She took a deep breath. "The reason I reached out is because Arjun needs a living donor. The waiting list for a deceased donor is too long, and his condition is deteriorating quickly. I was tested, but I'm not a match." Understanding dawned on Alex. "And you want me to get tested? To see if I'm a match?" Priya nodded, looking both desperate and apologetic. "I know it's a huge thing to ask, especially after all these years. But Alex, you're the only person I could think of. My parents are too old, Raja's family is in India and unwilling to help, and I don't have many close friends here." Alex looked back at the baby, so small and vulnerable. Then at Priya, the girl who had once helped him through the darkest period of his life, when his mother died and his father turned to alcohol. Priya, who had believed in him when he declared his dream of starting his own company one day. Priya, who had been more family to him than his own blood. "Where do I get tested?" he asked simply. Relief and gratitude flooded Priya's face. "The transplant coordinator can set it up. But Alex, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. It's a major surgery, with recovery time and potential complications. Your life would be on hold for weeks, maybe months." Alex smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Then it's a good thing I'm the boss. I can work from anywhere." The next few days passed in a blur of medical tests, consultations, and paperwork. Alex moved into a suite at the hotel near the hospital, converting the living area into a temporary office. His executive team was bewildered by his sudden absence but adapted to virtual meetings and late-night calls. 5 days after his arrival in Boston, Alex sat across from Dr. Reynolds, the transplant specialist, in a small consultation room. "Well, Mr. Chen, it appears you're a match for baby Arjun," the doctor announced, reviewing the results on his tablet. "That's great news," Alex replied, feeling an unexpected wave of emotion. "So what happens next?" Dr. Reynolds explained the procedure in detail, how they would remove a portion of Alex's liver, which would regenerate over time, and transplant it into Arjun. The risks, the recovery process, the follow-up care. Throughout the explanation, Alex found himself not thinking about the disruption to his life or the physical pain he would endure, but about the tiny baby fighting for his life and the woman who had once been the most important person in his world. When he returned to Priya's room to share the news, he found her sitting in a rocking chair by the window, holding Arjun. The baby was awake, his big brown eyes taking in the world around him despite his illness. "I'm a match," Alex announced from the doorway. Priya looked up, her eyes filling with tears. "Alex, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," he said, moving to kneel beside the chair. "Can I hold him?" With careful movements, Priya transferred the baby into Alex's arms. Arjun weighed almost nothing, a fragile bundle of life that somehow managed to stare up at Alex with curious, trusting eyes. "Hey there, little guy," Alex whispered. "We're going to fix you up, okay? As he held the baby, a strange feeling settled over Alex, a protective instinct he had never experienced before. In his world of corporate takeovers and technological innovations, human connections had become secondary. But now, looking down at this child, he felt a shift in his priorities, a realignment of what truly mattered. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to it, Alex spent hours in Priya's hospital room, catching up on the years they'd missed. He learned that she had completed her residency and was working as a pediatrician, a career temporarily on hold as she cared for Arjun. She asked about his company, and he found himself downplaying his success, suddenly aware of how hollow certain achievements felt in the face of real-life struggles. The night before the surgery, Alex stayed late at the hospital, watching as Priya sang a lullaby to Arjun. The melody was familiar, the same song Priya's mother used to sing to them during sleepovers when they were children. "Remember when we used to talk about what we wanted to be when we grew up?" Priya asked softly, after Arjun had fallen asleep. Alex smiled at the memory. "You always said you wanted to be a doctor, to help people. And look at you now. And you wanted to change the world with technology. Which you've done." Priya looked at him thoughtfully. "Did you ever imagine our lives would take us so far from each other?" Alex shook his head. "No. I always thought you'd be part of my life, somehow." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Alex had never told Priya about the crush he'd harbored throughout high school, or how devastated he'd been when she started dating someone else in senior year. By the time they were both single again, they were in different states, pursuing different dreams. Life has a funny way of bringing people back together, doesn't it? Priya said quietly, her eyes not meeting his. Before Alex could respond, a nurse entered to check Arjun's vitals, and the moment passed. But as he walked back to his hotel that night, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's surgery would change more than just Arjun's life, it would change his own in ways he couldn't yet imagine. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of his hotel room, Alex thought about the path that had led him here. The relentless pursuit of success that had defined his adult life. The relationships he'd never allowed to deepen because they might distract him from his goals. The family he'd never prioritized having because there was always another milestone to reach first. For the first time, he wondered if he had been running toward the wrong future all along. And as sleep finally claimed him, his last thought was of Priya's smile and the tiny hand of a baby who, against all odds, had brought him back to the one person he had never truly forgotten. The morning of the surgery arrived with a pale dawn light filtering through the hospital blinds. Alex had checked in at 5 a.m., following all pre-surgery protocols with the calm efficiency that had made him successful in business. But beneath his composed exterior, nervousness churned. This wasn't a business deal. This was life and death, for a baby he'd only just met, but who already occupied a permanent place in his heart. As nurses prepared him for surgery, Alex thought about the empire he had built. Right now, halfway across the country, his executive team was probably gathering in the conference room, making decisions without him for the first time in the company's history. Strangely, he found he didn't mind. Chen Innovations would survive without his constant oversight. But without this surgery, little Arjun might not. "We're ready to take you to the operating room, Mr. Chen," a nurse announced, breaking into his thoughts. "Can I see Priya and Arjun first?" Alex asked. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a minute. Dr. Kumar is with her son in the pediatric pre-op area." They wheeled Alex's gurney through the quiet corridors of the hospital until they reached a small room where Priya sat beside Arjun's specialized bassinet. When she looked up and saw Alex, her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, as if she had cried all the tears she had and was now operating on pure determination. "Hey," Alex said softly. Priya stood and came to his side, taking his hand in both of hers. "Alex, I..." "Don't," he interrupted gently. No big speeches or thank yous, okay? I want to do this. She nodded, a small smile breaking through her worry. You always were stubborn. Look who's talking, he replied, and for a moment, they were kids again, bickering good-naturedly over whose turn it was to pick the movie for Friday night. Priya leaned down and pressed a kiss to his forehead, a gesture so unexpected that Alex felt his heart skip. We'll be waiting for you when you wake up, she promised. Then the moment was over, and the nurses were wheeling him away. The last thing Alex saw before they turned the corner was Priya bending over Arjun's bassinet, whispering words of comfort to her son. The operating room was bright and cold, a symphony of beeping machines and efficient movements as the surgical team prepared. Dr. Reynolds appeared at Alex's side, his expression reassuring behind his surgical mask. Ready, Mr. Chen? Alex nodded. Take good care of us, document. There are people waiting. As the anesthesia began to take effect, Alex's last conscious thought was of Priya's smile, not the worried one he'd seen moments ago, but the carefree one from their childhood, when the future stretched before them like an unwritten story. When Alex opened his eyes again, the world was hazy and distant. Pain radiated from his abdomen, dulled by medication but still present. A ceiling of acoustic tiles came into focus, then the face of a nurse checking his monitors. Welcome back, Mr. Chen, she said cheerfully. The surgery went very well. Alex tried to speak, but his throat was dry and scratchy. The nurse offered him a few ice chips, which he accepted gratefully. Arjun, he managed to ask once he could speak. Still in surgery, but Dr. Reynolds says everything is proceeding as expected. She checked her watch. They should be finishing up soon. Alex nodded, relief washing over him despite the pain. He had done what he could. Now it was up to the doctors and Arjun's tiny but resilient body. The next few hours passed in a blur of semi-consciousness as Alex drifted in and out of sleep. Each time he woke, he asked about Arjun, and each time, the news was cautiously positive. The transplanted portion of his liver had been successfully placed in the baby's body. Now they had to wait and see if it would take. It was nearly evening when Alex woke to find Priya sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted but hopeful, the weight of months of worry beginning to lift from her shoulders. Hey, you, she said when she noticed he was awake. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, Alex admitted with a weak smile. But I'll live. How's Arjun? Priya's face lit up. He's doing well. Better than expected, actually. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. Can I see him? As soon as you're both strong enough, she promised. Right now, you need to rest and recover. Alex wanted to argue, but fatigue was already pulling him back toward sleep. He felt Priya's hand slip into his, a warm anchor in the midst of pain and medication-induced fog. Thank you, she whispered as his eyes drifted closed. For giving my son a chance at life. The days following surgery were among the most challenging of Alex's life. Used to being in control, to pushing through discomfort in pursuit of his goals, he now found himself at the mercy of his body's healing process. The pain was significant, and the limitations frustrating. But unlike the injuries and illnesses of his past, this recovery had purpose, a purpose that waited just a few hospital rooms away. 5 days after the surgery, Alex was deemed strong enough for a short visit to the pediatric ICU. A nurse helped him into a wheelchair and pushed him through the corridors to where Arjun was recovering. Priya was already there, keeping her constant vigil by her son's side. The baby looked different than Alex remembered. His skin, though still yellowed, had a healthier glow. The multiple tubes and monitors remained, but there was a new energy about him, as if his tiny body recognized it had been given a second chance. There he is, Priya said softly as Alex was wheeled to the bedside. Our miracle baby. Our miracle. The words echoed in Alex's mind, stirring emotions he couldn't quite name. He wasn't Arjun's father, and yet in the most fundamental biological sense, a part of him now lived within this child. It created a connection he had never anticipated. He looks stronger, Alex observed, studying the baby's face. He is. His liver function tests are improving every day. Priya gently adjusted Arjun's blanket. The doctors are amazed at how well he's responding to the transplant. He's a fighter, Alex said. Like his mom. Priya looked up, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race despite his weakened state. I never got to ask, why did you say yes so quickly? Most people would at least need time to think about donating an organ, especially to someone they haven't seen in years. Alex considered the question, looking for the right words to explain a decision that had felt instinctive rather than rational. Do you remember when my mom died? I was 14, and my dad completely fell apart. You and your family basically adopted me that year. Priya nodded. My mom always said you were the son she never had. You were there for me when I had no one else. Your family showed me what real support looked like. Alex paused, emotion making his voice rough. I never forgot that, Priya. Even when we lost touch, even when I was building my company and thought I was too busy for relationships. I never forgot what you taught me about being there for people who matter. Tears welled in Priya's eyes. We were just kids. Kids who knew what mattered, Alex replied. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. But when I got your message, it was like being given a chance to remember who I really am. They sat in silence for a moment, the beeping of Arjun's monitors the only sound in the room. Finally, Priya spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. When Raj left, I thought I was alone in this. That it was just going to be me and Arjun against the world. She looked up at Alex. I never imagined you would come back into our lives like this. To be honest, neither did I, Alex admitted. But I'm glad I did. The moment was interrupted by a nurse coming to check Arjun's vitals. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but you should return to your room now. You need your rest too. Alex wanted to protest, but the fatigue and pain were becoming harder to ignore. As the nurse prepared to wheel him back to his room, Priya leaned down and kissed his cheek. Get some rest, she said. We'll be here tomorrow. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Alex, growing stronger each day, would visit Arjun's room for increasingly longer periods. He brought his laptop and worked from a chair beside the baby's crib while Priya took short breaks to shower or nap in the nearby family accommodation. Sometimes they talked about the years they'd missed in each other's lives. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, two people united in their concern for the small life fighting to get better. Alex learned about Priya's medical career, how she'd specialized in pediatrics because of her love for children. He heard about her marriage to Raj, how they'd met in medical school, fallen in love over late-night study sessions, and planned a future that included successful careers and a house full of children. He listened as she described the joy of discovering she was pregnant, followed by the devastation of Arjun's diagnosis shortly after birth. And he felt a cold anger when she hesitantly shared how Raj had gradually withdrawn as Arjun's condition worsened, eventually announcing he was returning to India to think things through. He hasn't called once to check on Arjun, Priya admitted one afternoon, her voice hollow. Not even after I told him about the transplant. Alex, who had been reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet, set it aside. His loss, he said simply. Some people aren't built for the hard parts of life. And some people, Priya replied, looking at him meaningfully, surprise you with their strength. The comment lingered between them, weighted with something neither was quite ready to name. In turn, Alex shared stories of building his company from a dorm room idea to a global enterprise. He talked about the early failures, the nights spent coding until sunrise, the first major contract that had changed everything. But he also admitted to the loneliness that had accompanied his success, the superficial relationships with people who wanted proximity to his power or wealth, the holidays spent alone because he was too busy for family traditions. "It sounds impressive when I list the achievements," he said one evening as they shared a takeout dinner in Arjun's room. "But there are days when I wonder what it's all for, you know? Who am I building this empire for if there's no one to share it with?" Priya, who had been checking Arjun's temperature, looked up with understanding in her eyes. "It's never too late to change course, Alex. To prioritize the things that truly matter." As the days passed, Alex found himself contemplating those words more and more. What did truly matter? His company? Yes, he was proud of what he had built, the jobs he had created, the innovations his team had developed. But sitting in that hospital room, watching Priya care for her son with unwavering devotion, he began to see his life from a different perspective. 3 weeks after the surgery, the doctors delivered the news they had all been hoping for. Arjun's body was accepting the transplant, and his liver function had improved enough that he could be discharged within days. The battle wasn't over. There would be regular checkups, anti-rejection medications, and careful monitoring for years to come, but the critical danger had passed. That night, as Priya and Alex celebrated with a small cake the nurses had smuggled in, a new question hung in the air: what happened next? Alex had been discharged from the hospital 2 weeks earlier but had chosen to remain in Boston, staying at his hotel and commuting to the hospital daily. But with Arjun improving, the reason for his continued presence was becoming less medical and more personal. The day of Arjun's discharge arrived with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Hospital staff who had grown fond of the baby gathered to say goodbye, offering well wishes and small gifts. Dr. Reynolds gave final instructions about medication schedules and warning signs to watch for, while nurses fussed over Arjun one last time. Alex stood slightly apart from the scene, watching as Priya absorbed all the information with focused attention. She was wearing regular clothes instead of the hospital loungewear he'd grown accustomed to seeing her in, jeans and a simple blue sweater that brought out the warmth in her complexion. With her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, she looked younger, more like the Priya from his memories. "Ready to go home, little man?" Alex heard her say as she lifted Arjun, now free of most tubes and wires, into her arms. The baby made a small, contented sound in response, his eyes, which had grown more alert each day, fixing on his mother's face. A nurse approached Alex with discharge papers for him to sign as Arjun's temporary medical proxy, a status Priya had insisted on given his role in the transplant. "You've given this family an incredible gift," the nurse said quietly as he signed. "Not everyone would do what you did." Alex glanced up at Priya and Arjun. "Some things are worth the sacrifice." Minutes later, they were walking through the hospital corridors for the last time, Priya carrying Arjun while Alex pushed a cart loaded with flowers, stuffed animals, and medical supplies. The spring air hit them as they exited the building, fresh and sweet after weeks of recycled hospital air. "I called for my car," Alex said, gesturing toward the parking area where his driver waited beside the familiar black Mercedes. "I thought it would be more comfortable than a taxi." Priya hesitated. "Alex, you don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "Besides, I've never seen where you live. I'm curious if your decorating style is still as terrible as it was in your college dorm." That earned him a laugh, a real one that reminded him of summer days and shared secrets. "My rainbow tapestry and lava lamp were the height of sophistication, thank you very much." The drive to Priya's apartment took them through Boston neighborhoods Alex hadn't seen during his hospital hotel commute. Her building was in a modest but pleasant area, a red brick walk-up with window boxes full of spring flowers. Nothing like the luxury high-rises Alex was accustomed to, but it had a charm he immediately appreciated. "Home sweet home," Priya murmured as they climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, Alex carrying a sleeping Arjun while she handled the bags. Inside, the apartment was small but thoughtfully arranged, a living room that flowed into a compact kitchen, a short hallway leading to what Alex presumed were bedrooms and a bathroom. The walls were painted in warm colors and decorated with framed photographs and artwork. A bookshelf overflowing with medical texts and novels dominated one wall, while toys and baby equipment were neatly organized in corners. "It's not much," Priya said, suddenly self-conscious as she watched Alex take in her home. "It's perfect," he replied honestly. "It feels like you." He helped her settle Arjun in his crib, decorated with a mobile of stars and planets, before they retreated to the living room. An awkward silence fell between them, the first in many days. Without the hospital routine to structure their interactions, they seemed suddenly aware of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. "Can I get you something to drink?" Priya asked, breaking the silence. "I probably have some tea or—" "What happens now, Priya?" Alex interrupted, the question that had been building for days finally spilling out. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I came here to help with the transplant. That part is done. Arjun is home and recovering well." Alex ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty that few in his professional life ever witnessed. But the thought of just saying goodbye and flying back to New York feels wrong. Priya looked up, her eyes meeting his. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to disappear from your lives again." Alex moved to sit beside her on the sofa, close but not touching. "These past weeks, despite everything, the surgery, the recovery, the worry about Arjun, they've been some of the most meaningful of my life. Being with you, reconnecting, meeting Arjun, it's made me realize how empty my life has been." Priya's expression softened. "Alex. Let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I know you're focused on Arjun's recovery, on rebuilding your life after everything that's happened. But I'd like to be a part of that, if you'll let me. Not just from a distance, not just as the guy who donated part of his liver." "What are you proposing?" Priya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex took a deep breath. "I'd like to stay in Boston for a while. Get a place nearby. Help with Arjun's recovery. See where this," he gestured between them, "might lead. No pressure, no expectations. Just time together." Priya was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if looking for signs of uncertainty. Finally, she reached out and took his hand. "I'd like that," she said simply. From the nursery came the soft sounds of Arjun stirring in his crib. Priya squeezed Alex's hand once before standing. "Duty calls," she said with a small smile. "Welcome to parenthood, Mr. Billionaire." As she walked toward the nursery, Alex felt something settle in his chest, a sense of rightness, of belonging, that had eluded him for years. Whatever came next wouldn't be simple or easy, but for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he wanted to be. 2 months passed in a blur of doctor appointments, late-night feedings, and quiet moments of connection. Alex found a furnished apartment just a 10-minute walk from Priya's place, a decision his real estate advisor had questioned with barely concealed surprise. "But Mr. Chen, we can find you something more suitable in Beacon Hill or Back Bay," Alex had politely declined, preferring the modest neighborhood where he could easily visit Priya and Arjun every day. His executive team had adapted to their CEO working remotely, though not without challenges. Weekly video conferences replaced in-person meetings, and Alex found himself delegating responsibilities he once would have insisted on handling personally. The freedom was unexpected and surprisingly welcome. On a warm June morning, Alex arrived at Priya's apartment with breakfast and coffee, using the key she had given him last month. He found her in the kitchen, Arjun strapped to her chest in a baby carrier as she sorted through mail. "Morning," he said, setting down the paper bag of pastries and tray of coffees. He leaned in to drop a kiss on Arjun's head, then, after a brief hesitation, kissed Priya's cheek as well. These small affectionate gestures had become part of their routine, though neither had pushed for more. "You're a lifesaver," Priya said, reaching eagerly for the coffee. Someone decided 4 a.m. was the perfect time for a singing performance. Alex laughed, gently extracting Arjun from the carrier. The baby had gained weight, his cheeks fuller, his eyes bright and curious. The jaundice was gone, replaced by healthy color. Only the small scar on his abdomen remained as evidence of his ordeal. "Were you giving your mom trouble?" Alex asked, lifting Arjun into the air, earning a delighted gurgle in response. "That's not very nice, buddy." "He's got your stubborn streak," Priya commented with a smirk. "Never wants to miss a moment of action." The casual comment, equating Arjun's personality to Alex's, hung in the air between them. It wasn't the first time one of them had spoken as if they were a family, but such moments always created a ripple of awareness of what remained unspoken. "Speaking of action," Alex said, bouncing Arjun gently, "I got a call from New York this morning. The board is requesting my presence for the quarterly review next week." Priya looked up from her coffee, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh? How long will you be gone?" "That's the thing," Alex said, settling Arjun on his hip, a move that had become second nature over the past weeks. "I've been thinking, maybe you two could come with me." Priya's eyebrows rose in surprise. "To New York?" "I'd arrange everything, private flight to avoid exposing Arjun to germs, a suite at the Four Seasons, a pediatrician on standby just in case." Alex tried to sound casual, though he'd been rehearsing this invitation for days. "I could show you my company, my home. We could visit Central Park, maybe see a show if you feel comfortable leaving Arjun with a sitter. It would only be for a few days." Priya was quiet, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "That's a big step, Alex." "I know." He set Arjun in his high chair, securing the safety strap before turning back to Priya. "But these past 2 months, they've been amazing, Priya. Being here with you and Arjun, helping with his recovery, watching him grow stronger every day. It's made me happier than I've been in years." Priya's expression softened. "It's been good for us too. Arjun adores you." "Just Arjun?" Alex asked, his voice quieter. Their eyes met, the question hanging between them. They had been careful, moving slowly, prioritizing Arjun's recovery above the growing attraction neither could deny. But there were moments, a lingering touch, a look held too long, conversations that stretched late into the night after Arjun was asleep, that spoke of deeper feelings. "No," Priya admitted finally. "Not just Arjun." Alex moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I'm falling in love with you, Priya. Probably have been since the day I walked into that hospital room. And I'm completely in love with that little guy." He nodded toward Arjun, who was happily gumming a teething toy. "I know it's complicated. I know we have different lives, different cities. But I want to try to figure it out. Coming to New York would be a first step, seeing if we can make this work beyond the bubble we've been in." Priya looked down at their joined hands, then up into his eyes. "I'm scared, Alex. Not of my feelings for you, those are clearer than I want to admit. I'm scared of disrupting the stability we've finally found. Arjun's been through so much." "I know," Alex said gently. "And I would never do anything to put his well-being at risk. But Priya, life is always going to involve some risk. Some change. The question is whether the potential reward is worth it." Priya was quiet for a long moment, her eyes drifting to Arjun, then back to Alex. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady with newfound certainty. "When do we leave?" Alex's face broke into a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her while being careful not to crush the baby between them. Priya rested her head against his chest, and for a moment, they stood together, not quite a family yet, but something very close to it. From his high chair, Arjun squealed happily, as if giving his approval to their plans. New York City welcomed them with clear skies and the energetic pulse that Alex had always loved. As their private car glided through Manhattan traffic, he watched Priya's face as she took in the towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, Arjun secure in his carrier beside her. "It's been years since I've been to New York," she said, eyes wide as she tracked the passing scenery. "I forgot how overwhelming it can be." Alex squeezed her hand. "Wait until you see the view from the penthouse." The car pulled up to one of the most prestigious addresses in Manhattan, where a doorman immediately rushed to assist them. Priya blinked in surprise as staff appeared, efficiently handling their luggage while treating Alex with a deference she hadn't witnessed in Boston. "Mr. Chen, welcome back," the building manager greeted them in the marble lobby. "Everything is prepared as you requested." On the elevator ride to the top floor, Arjun babbled happily, seemingly unimpressed by the luxury surrounding him. When the doors opened directly into Alex's penthouse apartment, however, even the baby went quiet, as if sensing they had entered another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of Central Park and the city skyline. The space was immaculately designed in shades of gray and blue, with sleek furniture and carefully curated artwork. It was beautiful, impressive, and surprisingly impersonal. "This is something else," Priya said, slipping off her shoes as Arjun squirmed to be let down on the plush carpet. "I had the guest room converted into a nursery for Arjun," Alex said, leading them down a hallway. "I hope it's okay. I tried to recreate his room in Boston so he'd feel at home." The nursery was indeed a nearly perfect replica of Arjun's room in Priya's apartment, down to the Star Mobile above the crib and the same brand of changing table. The only difference was the quality of materials. Everything was top of the line, clearly purchased new for this visit. "Alex, this is too much," Priya said softly. He shrugged, suddenly looking almost shy. "I wanted you both to be comfortable." Later that evening, after Arjun was asleep in his new yet familiar surroundings, Priya joined Alex on the balcony overlooking the city. He handed her a glass of wine and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkle against the darkening sky. "Tomorrow's schedule is pretty full," Alex said eventually. "Board meeting in the morning, lunch with the executive team, then a presentation for potential investors in the afternoon. But I thought maybe we could all have dinner together at this little Italian place I know. The owner loves babies." Priya nodded, but her expression was distant, thoughtful. "What's on your mind?" Alex asked gently. She turned to face him, the city lights illuminating her features. "This is your world, isn't it? Not just this apartment or this view, but all of it, the staff who know your name, the board meetings, the investor presentations. This is the life you've built." "It is," Alex acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean there isn't room for more." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Alex, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, was almost unrecognizable from the man who had spent 2 months helping change diapers and singing lullabies. He kissed Priya and Arjun goodbye, promising to check in throughout the day, before rushing off to his meetings. Left alone in the cavernous penthouse, Priya felt suddenly adrift. The same staff who had greeted Alex so warmly now hovered, offering assistance with anything she might need for herself or the baby. A personal chef appeared, inquiring about preferences for lunch. A concierge called, explaining that a car was at her disposal should she wish to explore the city. It was all perfectly thoughtful, perfectly luxurious, and perfectly overwhelming. By mid-afternoon, Priya had had enough. Bundling Arjun up, she declined the offered car service and instead set out on foot, baby carrier strapped to her chest. She found herself in Central Park, sitting on a bench as Arjun napped against her, watching children play and couples stroll hand in hand. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex, "How's your day going? Missing you both." She smiled despite her conflicted feelings, typing back, "Taking in some fresh air in the park. Missing you too." As she put her phone away, an elderly woman sat down beside her, smiling at the sleeping Arjun. "What a beautiful baby," the woman remarked. "You make a lovely picture together." "Thank you," Priya replied. "Are you visiting New York?" the woman asked conversationally. Priya hesitated. "Yes. Maybe. I'm not sure yet." The woman chuckled knowingly. "Ah, deciding whether to make a big move, are you? I remember that feeling. Terrifying and exciting all at once." "Something like that," Priya admitted. "How did you know?" "The look on your face, dear. Like you're standing at a crossroads." The woman patted her hand. "I had that same look 53 years ago, when my late husband asked me to move from my small town to this big, scary city. Best decision I ever made, though it didn't feel that way at first." Before Priya could respond, her phone rang. It was Alex. "I'm so sorry," he said when she answered, his voice tight with stress. "The investor meeting is running long, and they've moved dinner to continue the discussion. I don't think I can get away until late." "I understand," Priya said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. There was a pause, then Alex spoke again, more quietly. "This isn't how I wanted today to go, Priya. I wanted to show you that we could make this work, my world and yours together." "I know. Tomorrow will be different," he promised. "Tomorrow is just for us." As she ended the call, Priya felt the elderly woman's knowing gaze on her. "Crossroads," the woman said simply, before standing with the help of her cane. "Good luck, dear." Watching her walk away, Priya looked down at Arjun, who had awakened and was staring up at her with his father's eyes. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Is New York going to be our new home?" Alex returned to the penthouse well after midnight, loosening his tie as he stepped off the elevator. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit by a single lamp in the living room. He found Priya curled up on the sofa, a book open but forgotten on her lap as she stared out at the city lights. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How was your meeting?" "Productive. Exhausting." He sank down beside her, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry about dinner." "It's okay. I understand." Her voice was gentle but distant, a contrast to the warmth he'd grown accustomed to in Boston. Alex studied her face, sensing the shift in her mood. "No, it's not okay. This isn't how I wanted to show you my life here." He took her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "Tell me what you're thinking." Priya was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Today was educational. Walking around this apartment while you were gone, seeing all these things that are part of your daily life here, it made me realize how little I actually know about this side of you." "What do you mean?" "In Boston, you're just Alex, the guy who brings coffee in the morning, who knows exactly how to make Arjun laugh, who sits with me on the couch talking about everything and nothing." She gestured around at the luxurious apartment. "Here, you're Alexander Chen, billionaire CEO. The man whose name makes people jump to attention. They're like two different people." Alex squeezed her hand. "They're both me, Priya. I'm the same person, regardless of where I am or what title people use." "Are you?" she challenged gently. "Because the Alex I know in Boston wouldn't miss dinner without calling until the last minute." The word stung because they held truth. In his New York life, last-minute changes and prioritizing business were the norm. No one had questioned it before, not his assistants, not his occasional dates, not even himself. "You're right," he admitted. "I slipped back into old patterns today, and that's on me. But Priya, that's exactly why having you and Arjun here matters so much. You remind me of what's important." Priya looked unconvinced. "I don't want to be the person who changes you, Alex. That never works. It's not about changing me, he insisted. It's about helping me become the person I want to be. The person I already am when I'm with you. Before she could respond, a cry came through the baby monitor on the coffee table. Arjun was awake. I'll get him, Alex said, standing quickly. You've been with him all day. Take a break. In the nursery, he found Arjun standing in his crib, big tears rolling down his cheeks. The baby's face lit up with recognition when he saw Alex, arms immediately reaching up to be held. Hey, buddy, Alex whispered, lifting him. What's wrong? Bad dream? He checked Arjun's diaper, finding it dry, then settled into the rocking chair with the baby against his chest. As he hummed a quiet lullaby, Alex felt the tension of the day melting away. Here, with this small life trusting and warm against him, everything else, board meetings, investor presentations, corporate strategies, seemed suddenly less significant. By the time Priya appeared in the doorway, Arjun was almost asleep again, his little hand curled around Alex's finger. You're good with him, she said softly. Alex looked up, his expression open and vulnerable in a way few people ever saw. I love him, Priya. I know he's not mine, but... He is yours, she interrupted, moving to kneel beside the rocking chair. In all the ways that matter. The simple statement hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. After a moment, Priya continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I had a lot of time to think today. About us, about the future, about what's best for Arjun. She reached out to stroke her son's cheek. I know we've been careful not to rush into anything, to make sure we're making decisions with clear heads. But the truth is, I've been falling in love with you too. Alex's heart seemed to skip a beat. Priya. Let me finish, she said gently. I love you, Alex. But I'm scared of what moving to New York would mean. Leaving my job, my support system, the life I've built in Boston. Becoming part of this world that feels so foreign to me. We don't have to figure everything out tonight, Alex said, shifting Arjun carefully as the baby drifted deeper into sleep. But I want you to know that I'm all in, Priya. Whatever it takes to make this work, commuting between cities, adjusting my schedule, even relocating Chen Innovation's headquarters to Boston if that's what you want. Priya looked startled. You'd do that? In a heartbeat, he answered without hesitation. I've spent 15 years building a company I'm proud of. But the life I want to build with you and Arjun? That means more. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Priya rose to her feet, leaning down to press a soft kiss to his lips, their first real kiss, filled with promise and possibility. Tomorrow, she said as she pulled back slightly. You said tomorrow would be just for us. Let's use that time to talk about what comes next. Really talk. Alex nodded, carefully rising to place Arjun back in his crib. Once the baby was settled, he turned and took Priya's hands in his. Tomorrow, he agreed. But tonight, will you just stay here with me? Nothing more than sleeping, I promise. I just don't want to be apart from you tonight. In answer, Priya led him from the nursery to his bedroom, where they fell asleep in each other's arms, the future still uncertain but full of hope. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows as Alex prepared breakfast in the penthouse kitchen. He moved with purpose, flipping pancakes and slicing fresh fruit while occasionally glancing at his phone where an email from his executive team awaited his response. For once, it could wait. True to his word, he had cleared his entire schedule for the day. No meetings, no calls, no interruptions. Today was for Priya and Arjun. The sound of laughter drew his attention to the living room, where Priya sat on the floor with Arjun, who was attempting to stack colorful blocks only to knock them down with delighted giggles. The sight made Alex's heart swell. This was what he wanted his mornings to look like from now on. Breakfast is almost ready, he called, arranging everything on a tray. Priya looked up with a smile that felt different from yesterday, warmer, more certain. It smells amazing. They ate together on the balcony, Arjun secured in a high chair between them, happily mashing pieces of banana. The city stretched before them, bathed in golden light, but Alex found himself watching Priya instead of the view. "I made a call this morning," he said as they finished their coffee. "To a real estate agent." Priya raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I asked her to send listings for houses in Boston. Places with yards, good school districts, room for a home office." He hesitated, then added, "And maybe room to grow, if that's something you might want someday." Understanding dawned in Priya's eyes. "You're serious about moving to Boston?" "I am," Alex confirmed. "I've been thinking about it all night. New York is where I built my company, but it doesn't have to be where I build our future." "What about Chin Innovations?" "I'll still need to come to New York regularly, at least for the next year or two while we transition more operations to our Boston office." He reached across the table to take her hand. "But I meant what I said last night, Priya. I'm all in." Tears welled in her eyes, but she brushed them away with a laugh. "You do realize you've completely ruined any chance I had of playing hard to get, right?" "Does that mean?" "It means yes, Alex. Yes to us, yes to building a life together, yes to finding a place with a yard and room to grow." She squeezed his hand. "But I have one condition." "Anything," he promised. "I need to go back to work." "Not right away, Arjun still needs time to fully recover." "But eventually. Being a doctor is part of who I am." Alex nodded without hesitation. "Of course. We'll make it work. Private nursing when needed, flexible schedules, whatever it takes." The rest of the day unfolded like a dream. They visited Central Park, where Arjun experienced grass and ducks for the first time, his wide-eyed wonder making them both laugh. They strolled through the Metropolitan Museum of Art, taking turns carrying the baby when he grew tired. They stopped for ice cream at a small shop where no one recognized Alex, allowing them a few hours of being just another family enjoying a summer day. In the afternoon, they found themselves on a bench overlooking the lake in Central Park, Arjun napping peacefully in his stroller beside them. The peaceful moment felt like a glimpse into their future, ordinary but perfect. "I've been thinking about Raj," Priya said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Alex tensed slightly at the mention of her ex-husband. "What about him?" "I should thank him, in a way," she said, her eyes on the distant horizon. "If he hadn't left, you and I might never have reconnected. Arjun might never have gotten his transplant. As painful as it was at the time, his leaving led us here." Alex considered this, then nodded slowly. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones. I forget that when I'm focused on controlling everything." "Speaking of control," Priya said, reaching into her purse, "I have something for you." She pulled out a small envelope and handed it to him. Inside was a key, simple, ordinary, attached to a keychain with a single letter, P. "It's to my apartment in Boston," she explained. "I know you already have one for practical reasons, but I wanted to give you this officially. As a symbol." Alex closed his hand around the key, emotion tightening his throat. "Thank you. This means everything to me." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, they made their way back to the penthouse. That evening, after putting Arjun to bed, they stood together on the balcony, the city lights twinkling around them. "You know what's funny?" Priya said, nestled against Alex's chest. "When I texted you from that hospital room months ago, I was so desperate, so afraid. All I wanted was help for my son. I never imagined that we'd end up here." Alex finished, tightening his arms around her. "That I'd find a partner. That Arjun would find a father." She turned in his embrace to face him. "That we'd become a family." "Family," Alex repeated, savoring the word. In all his years of building wealth and success, it was the one thing he'd never managed to create. Until now. He kissed her deeply, pouring every unspoken promise into the gesture. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Priya Kumar. You and Arjun are the best things that have ever happened to me. I love you too, she whispered. Thank you for saving us. Alex smiled, thinking of the hospital rooms and sleepless nights, the fear and the hope, the journey that had brought them to this moment. We saved each other, he said simply. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, witnesses to a love story that had begun with a desperate text message and a life-saving gift, and would continue long after they left New York behind.